My name is David.
And my name is Jason.
And this is Discern Realities, a Dungeon World podcast. Our first segment is What Happened Here Recently?
So, I have invented a brand new term, a gaming term.
All right, let's hear it. What do you got?
It was kind of a joke. I don't know if you heard the last episode of the Gauntlet podcast, but I kind of made like a little joke in the stinger with Fraser where I talked about how the game, The Sprawl, is not on rails as much as it is in a corridor. Because it's mission-based, and so you're always kind of working on the mission and going towards the conclusion of the mission, but you can move around within that adventure, right? You can do things in the middle of it, so it's a corridor rather than on rails, because on rails you're just moving to the end and you don't have any freedom, right?
Sure.
So I got thinking about it, and I was like, you know what? Many of my sort of adventure-y, mission-based games are this way, because I only have usually like 4 or 5 sessions, sometimes even 3, to get a story done. And so I kind of try to keep the group pretty focused on the mission at hand, or at least like kind of gently using my friends to just like push them in that direction, right? But within that, they have a lot of freedom to define the fiction. They have a lot of freedom to pursue like little side objectives and side scenes, but they're still kind of moving down the corridor, right? So I'm now referring to some of my games as being run through a corridor rather than something else. I don't know. Anyway, the point I'm getting at though here for the segment is I'm presently running a thing in Zach Smith's Red and Pleasant Land, that's kind of the Alice in Wonderland with vampires setting, right? We've talked about it before in the past. In this setting in particular, I tend to not do the quote-unquote corridor thing that I've just invented. I tend to like kind of open it up a little bit and let them just kind of explore and kind of see what happens, And I did that this time. The players were at a garden party being thrown by the Heart Queen right before a croquet match, okay? And the whole adventure has been kind of leading up to this croquet match. And I thought, okay, well, this croquet match, like the outcome of it will determine certain things that the different party members are trying to accomplish, right? And I thought like they would use this garden party, which I kind of turned them loose in, to sort of like work on different aspects of their individual motivations for being on this adventure, right? Like I thought, okay, that's what they're going to do. They're going to like, do their own little things or whatever, but we're just going to get to the croquet and it's going to be fine. Oh no. Like, oh no. Because I give my players so much freedom to define the fiction, like they really grabbed hold of it. And like, Philip, one of my players, he says, I think there's a tent over here and there's screaming coming from the tent and there's a line of people standing in line to go inside. I'm going to go get in that line for that tent. I'm like, oh, okay.
All right, Philip, what's in the tent?
Well, yeah, I know, right? And then, Fraser, speaking of Fraser, he's like, I think this wizard who I trained with when I was a kid is stuck in Voivodja. That's the name of the setting. And I'm going to try to find her. And I think there's a manticore at the party. And the manticore hunts wizards. And so I'm going to go find the manticore and pose a riddle to the manticore that's going to trick him into finding the wizard for me. I'm like, okay. It's just...
I've played in your games, Jason, and how did you get to these outcomes? Did you ask them some question that prompted this outcome? It sounds like you were just introducing... they were just introducing details like the indie hack. Like they weren't in control of their player, they were in control of the entire scene, and you were having to run with it.
Yeah, I mean, I could have reined that in, right? I mean, I could have said, I could have put a tighter frame on it, I guess. But I was having fun with it. I mean, I wanted to see what they would come up with. Like I going back to something we talked about a couple episodes ago, this idea of painting the scene, or maybe that was last episode. But when they first got to the garden party, I asked them, okay, well, how do you know? Like, show me the detail. Give me the details that indicate to you that this is a place. That is both red and pleasant, and red means filled with vampires, and pleasant means like decadent and luxurious, right? And so they were painting these details, and I think they just got going on a creative jag, and the next thing you know, we're trying to figure out what's screaming inside the tent and why are people lining up to go in there.
Okay, all right, that makes a lot more sense now. I was trying to figure out how you got to this outcome.
Yeah. But it was really fun. I think they're going to get back in the corridor for session 4.
Back in the corridor.
Get back in the corridor. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say about it.
Nice. Yeah. I haven't run a game like quite that fast and loose. Like I've had like many things introduced when I've asked questions that I have like reintegrated and have become huge parts of stories, but not as quickly as this looks like it developed for you.
Yeah,
so
it was fast. It was like one scene after another, right? And I was just smash cutting like fucking crazy to give myself time to figure out what was going on. I was like, awesome, cool, smash cut. What are you doing? So
awesome, nice. Yeah, so that's not quite in the corridor is what it sounds like. But I like this idea of in the corridor or in a corridor, like as opposed to on rails. I think that's a good turn of phrase that kind of describes a little bit of how we run Dungeon World.
I think, that's kind of, it makes sense, right? I mean, I think it would be a little different. I definitely think the way I run Dungeon World would be different if I had like the same group of people every week and we were planning on playing for a year, right? Like, I think that would be different. Like, I think we'd have more time to kind of just wander about and do whatever and make adventure as we go. But when you have a limited amount of time, you do have to kind of put some frames on it.
Sure. Yeah. I 100% agree. I ran probably the shortest, quickest session of Dungeon World I've ever run in my life earlier this week. And it was like, it felt kind of on the rails for me because I was like, we have to do these things for a session of Dungeon World to happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like it. It's kind of back to that old idea that we talked about ages ago, like about the sandbox, and is the sandbox an illusion or it's probably a corridor?
Yeah, I remember that. That was a good conversation.
Yeah. But yeah, that's I like it. I have to think about this idea of in the corridor some more. We might have some later thoughts on it in the future episodes, but until then, let's go ahead and move on to our next segment. Our next segment is, what should I be on the lookout for?
So, listeners, we are here with Slade Stoller from Scablands Press. You may have heard us talk about them before on the show. And Slade is here to talk about his brand new game that is hitting Kickstarter, I think the day this comes out, the Kickstarter launches or thereabouts, for Dust, Fog, and Glowing Embers. So, Slade, thanks for coming back on the show.
Thanks for having me again.
Slade, just give us like an overview of Dust, Fog, and Glowing Embers. What is it?
So Dust, Fog, and Glowing Embers is an idea that I've been kicking around for quite a while, wherein you're not the most powerful forces in the city, but when you use these alchemical essences, you gain a whole bunch of really interesting powers. And the idea is that it kind of fills that space of Vampire the Masquerade, where you've got these powers and they're quite potent, but you're not sure what they're doing to your soul.
That's awesome. So I understand you've provided us with a bit of the text, and from my reading of it, it sounds like this is a very different kind of world where science may not exactly mean what it means in our world or how people might understand what science is. Would you mind speaking on that a little bit?
Sure, yeah, that's a key part of the world building that's going on there. So I wanted to take pretty much every kind of pseudoscience or non-science that I could find and bring that into the game. So what if astrology is a perfectly valid way to determine what's going to happen in the near future?
Is it not?
We're breaking some truth here on the show. Or for example, like something like trepanning, where you carve a small hole in the skull to allow more oxygen into the brain. What if that actually was beneficial? Or leeches, or, bloodletting, or, what if these kind of non-scientific things that at the time seemed, cutting edge were in fact what won out, rather than, the kind of thing that we all know today.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. It's a neat idea. When I read the text as well, and I got in terms of the setting, I got kind of a, sort of spiritist movement of the 1920s vibe, a little bit of like kind of the Dishonored video game kind of whale punky vibe or something like that. I don't know. Maybe I'm just grasping at straws here, but is that how you, is it kind of more like that in terms of like this sort of pastiche or whatever, like of its setting, like the fantasy setting?
Yeah, so I was looking at doing something right at the cusp of industrialization. It's in a way, it's to get away with the fact that I want people to be firing flintlock pistols at each other, but it's also in that period where maybe these quasi-plausible things could be happening. And it's before the kind of industrialization of science. So I don't know if you've looked at the very early proceedings of the Royal Society. This is one of the very first like scientific papers, and they have the weirdest papers. Like it's something like I sent the cook down into the cellar to stir the salted fish, and a glow was produced, and that's a paper. Like that's so these kind of odd observations, of course, over decades they build up to a body of science, but at the time it's just, oh, look at this weird thing we found.
Like, it's a super interesting setting. It took me a minute to get a hold of it, and I think part of that was like because I've never seen anything quite like this before. Is there anything, any text or any like movies or anything that might help players like really grok this just from the start?
What's your Appendix N, I think is what David's getting at.
Probably the answer there is you should play the BioShock video games.
Oh, okay, cool.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one.
I think you should probably play the Fallout video games. Although the setting is quite different, I think it takes a similar approach to quasi-science. And in terms of existing games, I would play Into the Odd to get a kind of weird setting that's kind of anachronistic but kind of proto-industrial. And you should play Vampire the Masquerade or some variant of it to kind of get that vibe of I really don't want to do this, this mission that we seem to have to do. And if I do it, we're going to have to use these crazy powers. And if we use these crazy powers, it's going to spiral out of control.
Well, so Slade, you mentioned Vampire the Masquerade, and kind of that like these characters have like abilities and powers. Like, what are some of the things that the characters actually like do? Like, what are their powers?
So the primary power that they get is the ability to turn themselves into kind of a mist form. And this, of course, allows them to be really sneaky and like slide under doors or avoid physical damage or jump to great heights. But as you develop, you kind of specialize into dust or fog or cinders, basically. And you kind of have these themed power types. So the mist types are more like cold and damp and these kind of powers and like weather control, and the dust ones are about like whipping stones and engraving things and covering your tracks, and the fiery ones are really interesting, start fires and use this offensively and things like that. So they're not really super typed to like fighty versus stealthy. They're all kind of mixed.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's all like born on this pseudo-scientific, or at least in this universe, it would be completely scientific. Like, what do you call them? A sporadic manifold?
Yeah, so the physical device that lets you do this is called the spagyric manifold.
Spagyric. It's a good word.
Yeah, no, it is the core word of this game, and we hadn't mentioned it up until now. But it's like alchemy, but it's more sort of plant-based. And it's based on the essences of these plants. So if you boil this, this sci-fi plant down, you get one type. And if you burn it, you get another type, and so on. So there are these kind of types to the essences, these alchemical juices that you inject into yourself, and that creates the power.
Okay, nice. And then there's like one other big part of the like pseudoscience of our universe that like is a big part of the character generation. And isn't that the four humors?
Right. So I came on last time and took to task the alignment system. This is my alignment system, basically. You've got the four classical humors, sanguine, phlegmatic, choleric, and melancholic. And you can be any of those four in your natural state. But then you kind of try to get people to activate other sides of your personality. So if you're choleric, but you meet someone new and that really sort of influences your impression, maybe you're phlegmatic with them or sanguine.
That's really interesting. That's an entirely different take on alignment than like I would have ever even considered. But it makes a lot of sense in this kind of a setting that you would attribute those to your humors.
What is the gameplay like? Like, what do you imagine like the typical sort of play session would be like? What would the characters be doing? What are they engaged in?
I think the characters are it's probably the weekend, and the characters have a little bit of this, these alchemical essences left over, and they decide to do something for themselves. I think that's probably where I would throw the first group of players is, into a mission that they've chosen for themselves. Although, definitely you should be doing missions for your patron. I throw them into a mission of their own choosing, and let them play in the sandbox a little bit.
Yeah, so you mentioned the patrons. This is running off of the indie hack kind of style of game where you have masters and patrons and things like that. And it sounds like what you're saying is like during the work week, the players' characters have to serve the patrons, and they use these crazy kinds of powers for their patrons' gain. And then on the weekends, they've just kind of either kept a little extra or not used all of it, and they want something for themselves.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty neat. Why should people who are listening to Discern Realities who like to play Dungeon World, or why would they want themselves to be playing this game?
Somebody who's playing Dungeon World has already kind of seen the light a little bit. They've branched out beyond the kind of 5th edition Pathfinder-y style of gaming, and they're really more interested in what the players can bring to the table than what the GM than the props that the GM can kind of build up just to be knocked down. The way that Dungeon World is played at the Gauntlet, and the way that I think it probably ought to be played, is you're getting a lot of feedback from the players about not just their place in the world, but kind of how the world works. So if a player doesn't care about phrenology, like determining character traits based on lumps on the head, I don't think you should put it in your game. But if you really do care about, some other feng shui, you want to bring in like Chinese architectural / cosmological resonances or something like that, then you should go for it. Bring it all in. And Dungeon World, by not giving you so much setting and really saying throw it back to the players when you're not sure, is doing a similar thing.
I feel like if you're into that style of play, like the indie hack, like it's kind of it's like a good next step, right? Because it's even more like sort of player driven, I think, than even Dungeon World is, right? Like it's got like a little bit more shared narrative authority.
So that's like kind of the indie hack in the mechanics contribution. Is there any like further sell that you would say that Dungeon World players would really be into Dust Fog and Glowing Ember portion of it?
Yeah, I'd be curious, like David, if you don't mind, I'm going to put just kind of finer point on your question there. What do you love about the setting, Slade? Like, why do you love this so much?
I love that question because what do I love about the setting? I love the idea that we can do a kind of thought experiment with things that for maybe even hundreds of years seemed like perfectly rational and reasonable explanations for things, and that were then sort of quickly dispelled. Most of that in the late 18th and up to the present century. So I think that's the fun bit. It's like I can really enjoy playing a cleric in a game of Dungeon World and enjoy a great pantheon of strange gods and just kind of my cleric believes in them. I don't have to worry about believing in them. My cleric can believe in them, and that's really cool. A willing suspension of disbelief, to me, is really all that gaming is. And I think what I was thinking, what if your setting was built on this concept? What if willing suspension of disbelief was like your main driving force in deriving a setting? I mean, if you've read Tolkien, you can understand Dungeons and Dragons, but you'd have to read cobble together an awful lot of strange steampunk and video games and existing games to try to make a setting quite like this.
I feel like your vision, like your design goal in terms of like the setting, like comes through really, really clearly, right? Like it is, it feels like a vision, right? Like it feels like you have a vision for what this setting is like, what this game is about. And I think you do a really great job of telegraphing it.
If that isn't enough stuff for you, you could use this book to run Dungeon World. I mean, you could use it as a setting book and ignore all of my beautiful rules.
Well, that's awesome. So I guess, Slade, let's just wrap up real quick. Tell us a little bit about the Kickstarter, like the dates of the Kickstarter, anything like in terms of like pledge rewards, that kind of thing.
Okay, sure. Yeah, the Kickstarter is going to be starting March 22nd, and it's going to run for 3 weeks. And the initial goal is $1,650, which is including things like artwork, layout, editing, fees, and taxes, and all that good stuff. The pledge levels that I think people are going to be most interested in are the simple PDF level at $10, the PDF plus, whenever you're ready, print yourself a physical copy through drive-through level at $15, and the digital, and I will figure out and ship you the physical copy at the $40 level.
Cool, awesome. And who's doing the artwork?
The inimitable Dirk Deckweiler-Leichty.
Yeah, I like Dirk. Dirk's stuff's really good. I'm happy to see that he's. I've seen some of the art pieces too that you have in there. They're pretty awesome. Dirk's pretty badass. That's awesome. I'm super excited about it. I will be pledging on day one because I think it's a pretty cool looking game. It's very, very unique. David, do you have anything else you want to ask Slade before we go?
I don't think so. Thanks for joining us once again. Looking forward to seeing how that Kickstarter progresses. Let's move on to our next segment. Our next segment is What Here Is Not What It Appears to Be. Jason, this week I thought we would talk a little bit more about the 6 questions of Discern Realities. Specifically, how you might answer them when it seems like either the player is really trying to ask something else, or they don't seem to know what they're asking and it's really off the wall in the context. Like,
give me an example of what you mean.
Okay, so usually you know what the player is kind of trying to do with their discern realities, because they don't just say I'm discerning realities, they're describing what they are doing, and in the context,
I'm looking to see if there are any traps, I'm looking to see if I can find any evidence of the mad wizard Balthazar or whatever.
Exactly. So I'm looking to see if there's any traps, and then they ask you who's really in control here, and you're like, what?
Oh, I see. Yeah, so they say they're looking for a certain thing, or they're looking in a certain place, and then they ask some bonkers question that doesn't seem to match up to what they were doing. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, like they're asking something that didn't seem like it was a part of their intent, or something that you didn't necessarily expect.
You have a note here. You have a line in our notes here that says they're looking in a bookcase, right, or in a desk. And then they ask something like, who's really in control here? When what you'd probably expect them to ask is, what here is useful or valuable, right? Is that a good example?
Yeah, or like, what here is not what it appears to be, or something like that.
Right, yeah. So, okay. Well, so sometimes it's not easy, right? I mean, I don't have too much trouble with it personally, though. And I'm sure if we talk about it for a bit, we can kind of reach some kind of good advice or tips or something. I mean, for me, it really comes back to the fronts. Right. I mean, it really does, which I don't really do the formal fronts anymore, but it's the same idea. I'm going to say fronts just for ease of reference, but it's essentially my notes, right? My notes for the session. And I don't just sit down to Dungeon World with nothing prepared. I don't do that. I think that's I rarely do it, I should say. I occasionally do it, but like that could be kind of fun sometimes. But for the most part, I have, at the very least, some possible ideas of what might be going on. Definitely by session 2, I have some ideas, right? Because by session 2, I should have my fronts and stuff made. So I guess to me, that's what it goes back to. I always find a way of whatever I had in mind for my fronts or whatever's going on in the adventure, I find a way of like recontextualizing that information to match up with what the question was.
Yeah, and that's what I generally do as well.
So, like, for example, in the instance where they are searching through a desk or a bookshelf, and I thought they were going to ask it, like every indication was that they were just looking for some like treasure or whatever, and then they go, who's really in control here? Well, if I know that the big bad of the adventure is doing something like, you know, on the campaign front, like some bigger question that's like in play, I will take that opportunity to maybe say, oh, maybe there's some correspondence in the desk that reveals this, right? Or maybe, you know, something like that, right? And so I think that's kind of how I handle those situations.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of handling it. Yeah, that kind of segues nicely into like the second question about this is, how do you answer them? Like the second part of that is, how do you answer it? Do you answer to the character or do you answer to the player?
I think it totally depends. I think for the most part, I answer the character because it's the character that's learning the information, right? But occasionally I will give the player some out-of-character context just to put a finer point on what just took place, right? So if I reveal a thing to a character and, you know, I want to make sure it makes sense to the players, even if to the character it's a little cryptic, right? Does that make sense? Or it's you know, or if I reveal a thing happening based off the DR, I reveal some information, I'll reveal it like in the fiction, but then I'll kind of pull back sometimes and tell the player exactly what just got revealed, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great way of handling it. That's generally what I've been doing lately. I will say, like, I've run into some situations where I keep getting asked, like, who's in control here? And, like, I have to kind of think about the context of what you mean, like, in control here? Do you mean in this location? Do you mean, like, in these surrounding circumstances? And sometimes that drives different answers.
I think it's a totally legit answer to say you're in control here, right? And I'll do that. Like, if I think what they're looking for is some kind of evidence of, is there a trap? Is there an enchantment? Am I walking into something right now? If I think that's what they're kind of looking for, and then they ask who's really in control here, and I know that there's no danger, I'll sometimes say you're in control. It's all cool, right? And I think that's a totally legit way of answering the question, because it's not a cop-out, because you're still answering them, right? You're giving them the information they're looking for.
Yeah. I agree.
It just depends on who's really in control, right?
I know. It also really depends on, like, how much time you have with your pacing of things. Like, do you want to get someone else involved in being in control here and have another mystery that your players or their characters are trying to look at? If it's like the first of 5 sessions, then maybe you say somebody else is in control here, something that maybe you didn't expect, and you figure out how to integrate that later.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, the answers to the DR questions are one of the best ways as a GM. This is true of all Powered by the Apocalypse games. That you have, as long as you're answering the question truthfully, you don't necessarily have to answer completely, right? This is a really important point in games like Monster of the Week, where it's more explicitly about an investigation, right? That game is much more about like the details of an investigation. And I use the questions to the investigate move, which is the equivalent of DR. I use the answers to pace out the story, right? Like, if, you know, they might ask me, where did it go? That's one of the questions, like, where did the monster go? If it's session 1, I've got 4, you know, if it's like session 1, I'm planning on it being a 2-session mystery, or if it's really early in a 1-session mystery, I won't just tell them right away, where did it go? Like, exactly. I might give a hint about where it went, right? But still kind of answering truthfully, just not completely. And so I think it's a skill, right? It's definitely a skill, what you're mentioning here, this idea of pacing, but it's one worth developing, right? Because it gives you a lot of control as a GM.
Yeah, absolutely. But anyways, I love the 6 questions. I wanted to bring it up and kind of suss this out a little bit, because I was cruising around the Dungeon World Tavern, and I saw there was a lively discussion going on how you answer the 6 questions, and I figured we could weigh in on it here, and hopefully they'll see us, and it'll be insightful.
What's the thrust of the conversation? I didn't see that thread. So what was the thrust of people were having issue with? Like how to improvise the answers, or how complete should the answers be? What were they what was their sort of axis they were discussing?
It was a very meandering question because it was presented in a very broad strokes with a new GM asking, how do you answer these kinds of questions? And when the players, sometimes they can't ask the direct thing that they're trying to ask, but what they're trying to ask. How do you go about that? I just
follow up with them. I mean, who gives a shit? If I know, sometimes usually it's really obvious what the player wants to know, even if they can't ask that precise question from the list, and I just go with it because I know what they're asking for. Or if I think they might be trying to get to a certain place in the question, they're trying to find out a certain thing, and I want some, if I think it might help me especially, I might ask for a clarifying question. I might say, well, what do you mean? Are you looking for X? Are you looking for Y? And that helps me as the GM, right? It helps me figure out what to tell them.
Yeah. When they seem to be searching a desk or something like that, and they ask who's really in control here, I usually ask a clarifying question. I'm like,
yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, it's just those, to me, those questions are just like a springboard for the conversation, right? You don't have to stick to them dogmatically, right? That's dumb. Why would you do that? The one thing I'll say, though, this is kind of switching gears a little bit, but it kind of segues from what I said earlier about kind of throwing the question back at the player to get more information from them. You can also disclaim responsibility for the answer, right? As the GM, if you think it's appropriate to do it, if you're just tapped out, creatively, you can always just go, what do you guys think? What do you think the answer is? And then just have the conversation proceed from there.
Yeah, I think that's something you can definitely do. I think a deeper question about the 6 questions. The book doesn't talk about you just letting your players ever ask questions. World of Dungeons does. And in the bigger context of PBTA, it seems like these are springboard questions, but do you think there should be this optional 7th question where they just ask whatever they're trying to ask that would be reasonable to discern realities?
I sometimes do a little homebrew or not homebrew, but a hack, where if they get a 12 plus, or if they get they get boxcars on their roll, I'll sometimes just let them ask whatever they want. They just get super insight or whatever, right? I think it's okay. It doesn't break the game.
Yeah, this is a very core thing to PBTA. Aside from the dice outcomes and being playbook driven, almost all PBTA games have an exploration move, and that's very unique to the system.
Yeah. There's a lot there. Like I said, it's a combination of things. It kind of comes down to just confidence and trust and skill. So
yeah, sweet. Well, let's go ahead and move on to our next segment. Our next segment is what here is useful or valuable to me.
So a few episodes ago, listeners will recall that we had Ray Otis on the show to talk about his brand new Dungeon World zine Plundergrounds, and he's getting ready to release issue number 2 of Plundergrounds. I've seen it. I kind of advise on it a little bit. I asked Ray if I could share something from it just to give listeners kind of a preview, and he said that was cool. Okay, so the second issue of Plundergrounds is called Kazarak, and it is about, in some ways, it's kind of the classic sort of lost dwarven civilization adventure, right? The dwarves are gone, and now here's all the stuff that's moved in, right? And we're kind of dealing with that. But there's definitely a twist. There are several twists. He takes a lot of the sort of classic lost dwarven civilization tropes and really spins them around and does some cool things with them. It's a very, very unique take on dwarves. I'm quite in love with it. And one of the aspects, the thing I'm going to share is these dwarves that were in this place, Kazarak, they raised these bears. These bears that are kind of uplifted beings that are now called star bears. And I'm going to read star bears. When the dwarves retreated from their underground homes, they left behind a small but stable community of magically uplifted subterranean bears living in the caverns and tunnels surrounding the old cities. At one time, the bears conversed with dwarves who knew the ancient tongue and even served them as allies in war. Now they are silent observers to the devastation of the dwarf homeland. Star bears are set apart from other bears by their unusual habitat and the star-shaped markings on their foreheads, a reminder of their magical transformation. They are mostly peaceful, but very dangerous when angry. And then there is the most amazing illustration of star bears in the zine. They are so cool looking with their little stars on their foreheads and just kind of their sort of tranced out looks on their faces. So anyway, that's a fun thing. And there's also a magic item associated with the Star Bears in this scene. The issue is just packed with stuff. The magic item is called the Book of Bears. It's one weight and it's fragile. This huge tattered tome contains the collected wisdom of the dwarves on the subject of star bears, so called because of the patch of white star-shaped fur on their foreheads. These bears were uplifted by the gods of the dwarves millennia ago to serve as allies in war and as guardians over their cities. Some dwarves also believe them to be watchers/informants for the gods. With some study, the book allows characters to speak with star bears and to better understand their fierce but noble nature. It's a crime that he's selling these things for $2. It's nutso because they're just jam-packed with information. Not just stuff about the adventure, Kazarok, but also like a couple of articles like that just deal with like sort of play tips and like little hacks for Dungeon World, and it's really amazing. If you have not backed Ray's Patreon to get the new issue, you should definitely do that. So.
Yeah, it's solid stuff. I mean, you could run a very happy year of Dungeon World for from each of these issues for their $2 every other month, and you could just keep running Dungeon World off of these for a long, long time.
Long time, yeah.
Cool. Let's move on to our next segment. Our next segment is What is About to Happen.
This is our ongoing comic strip AP featuring the adventures of Ramshackle Crow and his companion Scabs and his silent judge, Urbina Castafiel. Maybe not so silent. When we last saw Ramshackle, he and the gang had just opened up this door and stepped into basically nothing, onto a precipice, looking out into a massive, seemingly endless void of giant gears and spinning whirly things, like a clockwork basically, but enormous and all over the place. So what's going on, Ramshackle?
Oh, this is so aggravating. You can't be serious. All this trouble to open this door, and what do we get? Nothing. He's just worn out.
Well, at least we have plenty of time to figure it out.
Yeah, you're telling me.
And the joke goes right over his head.
But Ramshackle and Scabs and the gang really need to take a breather. Ramshackle's not doing so hot. He's gotten beat up pretty bad in the last few little scenes and hasn't had a minute to catch his breath.
What are you down to HP-wise? I'm
down to 5 HP.
Okay. Do you want to try to find a place to make camp?
Well, it looks like I've got about 2 options. I've got out here on this little ledge or in there where there's 2 more doors that are, I don't know.
Yeah, who knows? Well, and also, just to remind everybody and you, whatever that controls this place is aware of you guys too. So that's an issue as well.
That's a problem. Honestly, I think that it would be most advantageous to set up camp right here on this ledge. We can keep an eye on the works down there, and if anything's like changing or obviously like happening, we can see it. If we're just in the room, like, I don't know, it's just kind of ominous. I'm not a fan of being in there.
Sure, I think that sounds great. I think this space is probably pretty cold. Like I said, I mentioned it's very vast and metallic. And so what about warmth? Are you going to make a fire? Do you have adventuring gear?
Yeah, I've still got some adventuring gear. We will make a proper camp because we just need a minute to kind of settle down, get feeling a little better, and maybe come up with a way of tackling this situation.
Urbina is bound, as a reminder. And she says, "You know, if you untie me, I can help you with that fire."
You keep going on and on and on about being untied. I'm pretty sure you're just going to stab me in my sleep or worse if I untie you. Why? What can you really bring to the table, Urbina? We can get a fire started.
Ramshackle, it's mostly a matter of the fact that people don't like to be tied up. People don't like to be bound. It's uncomfortable, frankly. And we're starting to reach a point where I'm not going to be able to stay like this much longer.
I think you will be able to stay like that as long as we require you to stay like that. I'll tell you what's uncomfortable. Seeing someone who you thought should have been helping you a long, long time ago show up and tell you it was all just a big trap, a big plan to get something out of it that involved you getting killed more likely than not.
Nature requires us to have the use of our facilities sometimes, and I really could use my hands to be free at this point. Unless you want to scratch my nose.
Scabs, keep working on this fire.
All right. He's got his flint and steel and he's doing his thing.
I'll pull Urbina aside, kind of into the other room. I'm like, what do you really want? This doesn't seem to be about what you're making it out to be. What are you hoping you can do if we untie you?
Ramshackle, I will be the first to admit that this plan that I concocted was probably pretty foolish. I don't know why I thought I would be able to track you down and turn you over to Catspaw in the beginning. I'm not sure why I thought I'd be able to successfully track Catspaw and get him to listen to my entreaties about dealing with death. I'm not sure what I had in mind, except to say that I'm very desperate. At this precise moment, as I sit here and ponder these things and consider the choices I've made in my life to lead me to this point, I would just like to have the comfort of my arms being free. I cannot possibly be any danger to you. I don't know how to get out of here any more than you do. We need each other, Ramshackle.
And what assurances can I have when I don't have you tied up that you won't turn on me or Scabs and try and shove us over the ledge?
Maybe you have no assurances, but if it makes you feel better, I'll stay in here in the room, and you and Scabs can stay out here on the ledge.
Let me see what Scabs has to say about the matter. No, I'll leave her there for the moment. There's nowhere she's going to go. And consult with Scabs and relaying what she's said and seeing what kind of advice our friend here has.
How about we do this? How about we untie our arms, but then we put a collar around her neck and tie her off inside the room so that she can walk about, like a dog or a pony, but she can't come out here and interfere with us while we sleep.
That might be the best thing I've heard you say in a decade or so. Scabs, you're really working on that noodle, aren't you?
I didn't know we had any noodles.
Never mind, Scabs. Don't worry about it.
Do we have noodles? I've got salted pork. I could really go for a pasta dish.
Never mind that, Scabs. If you've got pork, we're in better shape than I first anticipated. How's that fire coming?
And he's just as you say that, or just as you ask, like there's a little spark. He's doing a little with a flint and steel in it, and it's lit up. He had a little bundle of twigs, right?
Yeah, definitely. Excellent. Things are looking up and up. I will attempt to secure her in the other room and make sure she is as comfortable as, well, a dog or a pony.
And I think you'll be able to secure her easily enough. Do you want to just kind of tell me what you do, like how that works?
Yeah, so I'll just, relay what information I can that, like, this is the plan, Urbina, and yes, you're going to have to put up with it. And I'll use, like, leather, like, I'll use, like, my belt, since it's leather, to, like, put that around her neck, because it's going to be much more comfortable than just, like, a rope. And then I'll, like, secure the rope.
All right, sounds good. But so she can move around this sort of circular room, but not get to where you're at, basically.
Yeah, and I double check to make sure that she doesn't have, like, anything sharp that she could just cut herself free with.
Yeah, perfect. The fire is lit, and Scabs he's fallen asleep by the time you get back out there. And so I guess you're on first watch.
Looks like it. I'm actually gonna, like, shift the fire a little bit. Like, I'll take one of the unlit logs and kind of push it more towards the doorway so Urbina can catch some fire if she wants to, but she can't, like, get out, and the smoke won't, like, fill her little room either.
Yeah, good move. Let's do the take watch move. When you're on watch, and something approaches the camp, roll plus wisdom.
Something's approaching in the first watch, huh? So that's a 12.
Nice. On a 10 plus, you're able to wake the camp and prepare a response. The camp takes +1 forward. Let's fiction that. So, how is the watch proceeding? Like, how do you pass the time?
So if Urbina's, like, on the other side of the fire, I think we'll, like, have some chit-chat for a while, but I imagine she eventually goes to sleep. And I just kind of get near the railing or the edge or whatever. Is there a railing, or is it just an edge?
It's just like a semicircle edge.
Yeah, and I'll, like, dangle my feet over the side and try to, like, just to keep myself awake, I'm trying to puzzle out whatever this thing used to be. Like, I'm looking at the gears and seeing what used to fit where and trying to see what was going on here. That's just kind of how I'm keeping awake.
Yeah, I might give you a DR on that later, but for now, you start to feel like a massive updraft of warm air, like a and then it stops. And then it feels like it's actually like a bit of a like a downdraft, like an inhale, right? And then that warm air again. And back and forth, like something is breathing, something really big. You're maybe looking over the edge, seeing where this is coming from, I assume?
Yeah, I think that I pull my feet back up and then lay down on my belly and, like, slide my upper torso out there a little way so I can see down.
And then you see down below 2 large eyes blinking open. And when I say large, I mean like the size of football fields large. And then, as it moves into the sort of natural, weird ambient light, the weird metallic light of this space, you see that there's a massive, massive face. A face the size of, gosh, I don't even know what, like a mountain. And it's old and wrinkly, and it has a long, long white beard, long like a river. And it appears to be sitting up beneath you. And I think we'll cut the session there.
That just leaves one final question. Who's really in control here?
We are a production of The Gauntlet. Our website is gauntlet-rpg.com. On that website, you will find links to our other shows, as well as a free issue of our zine Codex Dark, and links to our G Plus community and other good things. We have a YouTube channel, which I want to direct listeners to, where we collect all of our podcast episodes if you want to listen to them on YouTube rather than on a podcast app. In addition, we have a really nice little playlists for our comic strip AP show that allow you to listen to each of the APs in order, which is very, very handy. We're on Twitter at GauntletRPG, and if you like what we do, support us on Patreon, please, at patreon.com/gauntlet.
I wanted to bring it to listeners' attention in case they weren't aware. If you want to know what's going on with Domenico Castifiel, check out that comic strip AP. It has recently occurred that his adventure there is, in fact, connected to the adventure that happened several episodes ago.
Well, more than several episodes at this point, but yeah, it's the comic strip AP Domenico Castafiel is now finally linking up with the Discern Realities Domenico AP. So if you're a fan of that one and want to see how it all kind of links up, you may want to go check that one out for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, listeners. That's our show.
Well, it was that or the phrenology thing, but I don't really want a little map of the head on the character sheet. I think that's silly.
I mean, I'd be down for that, but
yeah,
I don't want to feel knobs on your head. That sounds.
No, I like the idea of a little diagram of the human head on the character sheet. Stretch goal. I think that sounds pretty cool.
Stretch goal, phrenology character sheet.
Yeah, what level would I have to kickstart for you to like feel my head and tell me who I am?
Oh,
exactly.
Man,
right.
That's not. I mean, it's not even on there, but
it's a big pledge amount.
we can work something out. I mean, I bet you have to pay for travel. That's the only downside.
Sure.
Oh my goodness.